And do you really want to be letting go a guy who's a proven winner, loads of experience, a leader in the team? Some would argue perhaps still even the best left-back on the roster. So it's an unbelievable dilemma.
This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo, giving you the inside track on all the big talking points from Anfield.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest Blood Red podcast with me, Ian Doyle. Joining me from, I presume it's its home. It's a journalistic legend. I hope you don't mind me saying so. It's Andy Dunn. Hello, the Mirror's chief football correspondent, is it? Oh, he's chief sports. Chief sports writer. Yeah. So all of the sports, not just the football, all of them. How are you?
All good, thank you. Not too bad at all.
Well, I'll tell you what, we'll go straight in then on a bit of breaking news that's happened earlier today. A bit of a surprise to, I think, a lot of us. It's that Tottenham are in talks with Liverpool over signing Andy Robertson in terms of actually signing him this month. I mean, what's your take on that?
You know what, Ian? Absolutely fascinating development. I mean, it really is. It's one of those where actually there's two main elements to this. Listen, it'd be no surprise if Andy Robertson, went to the end of the season, went on a free transfer. Possibly there've been talk of Spurs already. Obviously, their need for a left-back has been hastened by the injury to Ben Davies, so they want Andy Robertson now. Why wouldn't they for the rest of the season? Andy Robertson, from his point of view, isn't getting a regular start in the Premier League for Liverpool. He's got the World Cup coming up. We captain Scotland in the summer. He'd like to be playing more in the second half of the season. So you've got the personal element of Robertson maybe seeing this as a good move, but the football element, Ian, from a football point of view, Liverpool, listen, the Premier League title defence imploded a while ago, but they've still got the Champions League, and I'm sure we'll come to it later. That performance in Marseille makes you think, listen, they've still got a real tilt to that Champions League title, and of course the FA Cup still. So there's still significant silverware to be won. And do you really want to be letting go a guy who's a proven winner, loads of experience, a leader in the team? Some would argue perhaps still even the best left-back on the roster. I don't probably think that's the case, but some would argue that. So it's an unbelievable dilemma. It really is, because think of all the other factors involved. The guy's given you 8.5 years service. If there's anyone who has earned the right to choose how he goes, when he goes, maybe it's Andy Robertson. I can't help thinking about that interview he gave after Scotland qualified for the World Cup, that emotional, that poignant interview when he spoke about his memories and his friendship with Diogo Jota. And I just thought, there's a guy, I mean, he is what he is. He's honest, he's hard as nails, he's got a big heart. And, for that reason, if he comes to Liverpool now and says, listen, I'm sure it might suit you to keep me because, you're going on a couple of fronts still in the second half of the season. But I think it's the best for me to move now. What do you do? What do you do if you're on the slot? What do you do if you're the sporting director? Also, the other added element is they'll get money for him now, whereas they won't get money for him at the end of the season. But then again, how much would we be talking? I don't know, 10 million? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Is that what they're talking? Yeah.
I think, there's no figures being mentioned, but you would imagine it would be around about that when you bear in mind that Trent went for about 10 million and he only had a month left on his contract. Exactly.
Now, is it worth, 10 million pounds? Would you pay 10 million pounds to have someone like him in your squad when you're going all guns blazing at the Champions League slot, bearing in mind he knows what it takes to win these things? It's just a really sort of, it's a delicate balancing act, isn't it? What do you? If you said the slot now, do you want to lose Andy Robertson for the rest of the season? Then I'm sure he'd say no. But then, is it a case of? And I actually think, from my point of view, the way I look at it, I think that he's given such incredible service to Liverpool. He's been such a leader in that time, such a great teammate to so many teammates down the years. I just think for everything he's done, if he says, listen, I think it's best to go now, then maybe that's it. Now, I know what people might say. People might say, well, why doesn't he just wait until the summer? So he goes on free, he probably gets a few more quid himself, to be honest, if he goes on a free in the summer. So why don't you just go to Spurs in summer? Well, the thing is what he might be worrying about, right, is that Spurs need a left-back. It's clear now that they want a left-back for the rest of the season. So if Robertson doesn't go, they'll get another left back.
Yeah.
So and what if that other left back who comes in does very well for these remaining 4 months? They won't sign Robertson in the summer. And there you've got a guy who turns 32 in March, has a chance to actually extend his Premier League career at a club, whatever you think of Tottenham's frailties and Tottenham being a bit of a sort of madhouse of a club, it's still a great move for someone at 32 years of age, and he might want to take his family down there. I think some of the lads spoke to him, didn't they? Some of the journalists spoke to him in the mix zone recently, and I think he sort of hinted at that he would have to do what's right for his family. But then again, I guess Liverpool, if you're being cold-hearted, you might say, well, Liverpool has to do what's right for Liverpool.
Well, this is the thing. The other, not complication, but something that has to be taken into account is that Liverpool do have another left-back option, which is Kostas Tsimikas, who's on loan at Roma, but he's not been playing there. So they do have the option, I believe, to recall him. So if they do take, well, I'm going to say sentimental decision, but there is a bit more to it than just the hard facts, isn't there? Certainly with Robertson's concerned. He's played there, 8.5 years, and he's been so integral to them being so, doing so well, first under Jurgen Klopp, then Arne Slot. The other interesting thing is I wonder whether or not he's looked at the way things have gone over the past 6 weeks, where Milos Kerkez has certainly stepped up a number of levels, I think, from having watched him all the time, is that he's kind of got to grips with how he's supposed to be playing for Liverpool. And Robertson probably thought he'd be playing a little bit more than he actually is. And with Tottenham, as you mentioned, Tottenham are a little bit of an insane club, but you're still playing in front of 60,000 every home game. And the way things are in the Champions League, they'll be through to the last 16. I think they'll probably beat Frankfurt in their last game. And Robertson would be straight into the team because he can play in the knockout stages. So he'd be playing probably more in the Champions League for Tottenham. Probably not as much chance of winning it as you would have at Liverpool. But he'd be getting the minutes, as you say, going into that World Cup. So it is a tricky one. But from Liverpool's point of view, I think a lot of it might depend on whether they can get Tsimikas back.
But really, I mean, he is an option. I get that. But then what kind of option? Tsimikas or Robertson? Listen, I've watched them down the years, and really, I don't find many who would say that Tsimikas is a like-for-like option for Andy Robertson. And as I said earlier, Ian, I've still got some of my mates would suggest that they would still have Robertson in ahead of Kerkez. As you quite rightly say, I think that ship has sailed now, and I think even just today, I think Arne Slot was talking about the progress of Kerkez, and he has made progress. But you're talking about big games that are coming up. You're talking about big, high-profile Champions League games that they're going to have on their plates in February and March. You saw what happened against PSG this time, in March of last year. What if something happens to Kerkez injury-wise? Is he still a little bit rash? And he's certainly untried at that sort of level. Robertson has got, he's been there, done it, literally. And he's been a big game player. I mean, he's been big in major European games. So he's clearly, you would want him. I think there is the other elements of, finance. If Liverpool do get money for a player who's out of contract, as you said, he got that for Trent in the end. But if you do get that sort of money, and it may be more than the 10 million that I've just bandied around, then, do the hierarchy thing. Well, yes, we'll take it. And don't forget, Slot has shown that he's not averse to sort of, how should I say, having makeshift left backs or right backs, and Szoboszlai could probably, he's done right back. He could probably do left back. I'm sure there's a few could do left back. Joe Gomez has actually played, if I remember rightly, I think Joe Gomez filled in at left back for England on one occasion. So, they have got those options. But having said all that, if you said, well, actually, I want two high-class... if I've got the option of having two high-class left-backs going into the final months of the season when we could win the Champions League, and don't forget, need to make sure that they secure a Champions League slot for next season, I don't think you let Andy Robertson go. However, I think for what he's done, I think the choice should be his. As you said, it sounds a bit sentimental. And, listen, I think there's nothing wrong with that in the end, especially, there's sometimes there are one-off cases, and I think he's a one-off case.
Yeah, going back to Tsimikas, I take the point that Robertson's played in a lot of big games, and he's a big game player, and he's a leader around the dressing room. But, Tsimikas did score the winner in an FA Cup final, so he's not averse to playing in these kind of big games, but he's not quite on the same level. But then, again, you're looking at, unless Kerkez gets injured, he's not going to be playing very much anyway.
No, exactly. And that's the thing. I mean, Andy Robertson, again, I'm bringing the World Cup, from his own personal point of view. The World Cup, clearly, we saw what it meant to him. He's going to captain Scotland going into that World Cup. They have got, I mean, I'm not saying that Robertson will not start for Scotland if he doesn't play much football between now and the end of the season, but they have got options at left back, and Scotland have unusually got actually more than, well, they've probably got 2 or 3 options there at left back. So, he will have that in the back of his mind that he needs to be fit and firing going into the World Cup. And, he's just the type of guy, isn't he? I mean, you know far better than I do. And he's just the type of guy who needs to be playing. And they all need to be playing at this stage of their career. And as I say, there's just that other element as well. What people, I think, sometimes overlook is that you get an opportunity. You don't get many great opportunities when you're turning 32 and in the Premier League. But going to Spurs is, again, you're quite right. It can be a bit flaky. However, you are going to one of the best stadiums in the country, a club that is waiting to be turned around. I don't see happening anytime soon. But, and I say he'll go straight into the team, whereas now, having played such an integral part, it must be incredibly frustrating to see him knowing really that he is strictly the second choice left back here.
I mean, from Arne Slot's point of view, he's mentioned a few times that he doesn't have the strength and depth or the options of, say, some of the other teams like Arsenal or Chelsea. This would be a major loss, not just on the pitch, but off it as well.
Right, exactly. And I don't think Liverpool are overly blessed with, a whole raft of strong leadership characters. We only have to see. I mean, I know this is probably a bit of an in-house thing, but we only have to see how many players do actually sort of come out and are vocal and front up in the media. And Robertson is one of them, other than obviously the dependable Virgil van Dijk, he is one of them who will do that. He is a leader, and they haven't got those characters. And in terms of numbers as well, if you think, much to Slot's chagrin has been made of who they bought and what they bought, the numbers-wise in the summer. But actually, if Robertson was to go, I think that's a lot of players that have gone off the books in the last, 6-8 months. I suspect it's almost double figures, including some defenders. They've let some defenders go. Quansah obviously went. And now for Robertson to go, I think it would leave him light. You've seen Liverpool having to Slot, as I say, having to put square pegs in round holes. And I think if he loses Robertson and doesn't get someone, by the way, in to replace him, which I think would be unlikely, I think the Tsimikas scenario is more likely, then he might end up having to do exactly the same thing. And you can get away with it. I think that right. So in theory, there's 3 things, Liverpool, second half of the season. Have a real go at the Champions League, the FA Cup, and make sure you secure a top 4 or top 5, as it probably is, finish for the Champions League slot. I think that you should be okay. Liverpool should be okay without Robertson in terms of a Premier League finish in the top 5. I think without him, then your chances of winning the Champions League and the FA Cup are slightly slimmer.
It is fair enough. I mean, just talking generally about Liverpool's transfer business this month, obviously they were interested in Mark Gay, who's gone off to Manchester City. Are you a bit surprised that, I know it's a bit daft thing to ask because they spent so much money in the summer, are you a bit surprised though that they haven't looked more strongly to strengthen the squad because of all the things that have happened so far?
Yes, I do. I mean, I do. And listen, there is still time. Again, I know Slot has strongly suggested that there will be no incomings before the deadline, weekend after this. I wouldn't be surprised if there was. Yes, I am slightly surprised, to be honest with you. I think the Mark Gay thing, for example, that if you're in for him and then he goes as he's gone, and by the way, that's another example of how of the sort of financial elements of what's a player worth for 4 months of a season. City maybe think, well, we could hang on again for nothing. Well, actually, we need him now. So we're prepared to pay. The going rate is we'll pay him £20 million for 4 months. In the same way that Real Madrid paid, £10 million for, one month's tournament in the States. Yes, I am surprised it is the simple answer. I still would not rule it out. I can't actually see out there, though, who it would be, to be perfectly honest. Listen, going forward, we've had this Mickey Vanderven link, but that's just a little bit pie in the sky as far as we're saying right now. But yes, I am surprised, but I wouldn't be surprised if something does happen.
Well, I was going to mention Vanderven actually, because, we've both been in the business quite a long time. We know the way these things work. Clubs do talk quite a lot, and sometimes deals can come in off the back of talking about somebody else. You think of when Liverpool were negotiating with Leipzig the other year to let Fabio Carvalho go out on loan. That's when they ended up discussing Dominic Szoboszlai, and he's turned out very good. So do you reckon there might be a little bit of that? Liverpool will be mentioned in Vanderven, not in terms of like part of a deal, but just generally?
Oh, generally, yes. I mean, listen, generally, I don't think it'll be any way connected to the Robertson situation. And I certainly don't think that Liverpool are going to go sort of like, throwing around £100 million to get Vanderven, which is the sort of outlandish sort of fee has been put on him. I don't think he's worth that, by the way, either. But I do think he's the type of player that they'll be linked with it in the summer. I do think there will be a centre-half incoming in the summer. Although having said that, I was incredibly impressed by Joe Gomez on was it Tuesday or Wednesday? And again, I'm a big fan, and maybe we'll come on to that in a little bit on reflection in Marseille on how well Gomez did. But yes, Vanderven is the type of player that, listen, most of the big clubs will be after him. As he now his camp seems to have suggested that he might be available. Again, no, I do think 100 million is just like, it's twice as much as he's worth. He's quick. I mean, let's face it, and pace sells, but I don't think it can sell to that extent.
Scores goals off set pieces as well, which obviously Liverpool this season yet.
And runs the length of the pitch and scores goals, which is all very eye-catching, but it still hasn't really sort of done Spurs a whole world of good, has it? And that's a go to fans as well, isn't he?
Yeah, he doesn't want to be doing that at Liverpool.
I wouldn't have thought so, mate.
No. We'll move on to Marseille then. I mean, you've touched on it. It was a good performance overall from Liverpool, but very different to a lot of the games they played recently, whereas they came up against a team that was quite happy to play out and, have a go against them rather than just keep everybody behind the ball. And that, in some ways, that kind of underlines just why so many teams do put, as Arne Slot says, a low block, because if you try to go toe-to-toe with Liverpool, invariably, you're probably going to get beat. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, it's a common thing in the Premier League now, isn't it? I mean, let's face it. I know Arne Slot talks about it a lot, but it is common in the Premier League. Where, listen, I was at the Manchester derby last week, and United, in theory, what they did, they inverted commas dominated the game without dominating the game. They only had 30% possession, but looked like scoring every time on the counter-attack. There's no point in going toe-to-toe with these teams. Yes, it did. And that's why in Europe, I think that, that's why the English teams are having quite significant success, as I say, albeit relatively in this daft 8th game stage. They're having a set, and it's not just restricted to Liverpool. Newcastle have got it because teams are coming at them. Arsenal, without a doubt, are scoring more goals, or they seem to be scoring more goals, or they seem to be winning with more flamboyance in Europe than they are here, because basically teams are willing to come and have a go. And I think some of that is as well sort of to do with the nature of the qualifying format, the 8-game format. There's not, whatever anyone tries to say, there's not as much jeopardy. Teams are willing to actually, have a go at the English teams, and they're generally quicker, stronger, and technically better. And that's what Liverpool were. Again, I know there's a lot of talk at the moment, isn't it, about Slot moaning about these low blocks and stuff. And to an extent, I get why people are sort of getting a bit frustrated with him, because, it's not, in any way, shape or form unexpected or unsurprising. It's your job to break it down. City used to be, for example, Man City used to be brilliant to break. You put a low block on City and they'd have weaved a pattern through you within 10 minutes and that was it, job done. They can't do that anymore. So if they can't do that, then Liverpool equally will be finding it difficult. All these top teams find it difficult. Arsenal just make sure, for example, that's why Arsenal are ahead of Liverpool, ahead of City in the title race, because they make sure that while they have the patience to break down that low block, they also make sure that they don't concede. And obviously, Liverpool's issue is not just having the problems breaking it down, but when they do get on the counter, they're conceding chances. And they conceded chances, don't forget, in Marseille in midweek.
I mean, Arne Slot made the point that it was a game where, for probably the first time in a while, that just because Marseille had one shot, that doesn't mean that they scored. You know, Alisson made a. I'm not saying Alisson's not been at fault for any of the goals really Liverpool have conceded this season, but he was in a position to make 2 or 3 saves, and that's probably been something that Liverpool have maybe missed. And going back onto the low block thing, it's not as though that's anything new. You know, it's been happening for years and years and years.
Yeah,
it's just changed. You know, it was parking the bus, wasn't it? It was parking the bus.
It was never a low block, man. No, I absolutely. Yeah, it is just parking the bus, putting 10 men behind the ball, two banks of 5, whatever you call it. You know, teams have done it forever. It's just more exact. I mean, it is quite idealistic to think that, and I don't think he does think that, but to think that every team's going to come out and sort of, you know, we went through an era, didn't we, in the Premier League, sort of briefly, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, when there were quite a lot of entertaining games, a lot of free scoring games, a lot of end to end stuff. It's been well documented that this season now is like, you know, is different. This season, maybe why Slot is talking about the low blocks is that he's thinking more general. How this season, you know, what we've had 17 goalless draws in the Premier League this season, which is more than there were in the entire 2004-2005 season. So maybe it's a general point that he's making. Well, but then, you know, I should say, I mean, it has always been the same, and it's a question. Then, I mean, clearly, this is why coaches are paid the fortunes that they weren't paid a long time. You know, managers were paid relatively little money to solve that problem a long time ago. They're now being paid, you know, tens of millions. So the least they can do is try and find a way around a team that parks the bus, as you said.
Yeah, Liverpool down 13 games unbeaten, and having witnessed almost all of them, I think all of them, they've not always been the most entertaining. But the Marseille game was good from that point of view, where it's perhaps a reminder to Liverpool themselves that they are capable of playing the kind of football that they showed last season.
Yeah, they are. And listen, I mean, I'm not saying he's particularly outstanding in the game, but, you know, if you are going to play that type, if you do want to play that type of football, if Liverpool's football is going to be attractive, incisive, entertaining, then listen, there's you know, I mean, the inclusion of Mo Salah in that team is just absolutely, you know, a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned. You know, it's funny how that's gone quiet. You know, we all expected the last time, after the Brighton game, and again going back to who speaks to the media when Virgil came in and said rather tellingly, you know, well, I hope he does well at AFCON, and I hope to see him back. You know, what do you mean you hope? You know, he might not be coming back. You never know. But what's been remarkable, isn't it? Is it really? Listen, there are some, you know, stories going around that Salah is on the Saudi radar, maybe more likely at the end of the season, but there's nothing out there, as far as I can see, I may be wrong, to suggest that anything's going to happen before the transfer deadline, which means that, you know, again, Liverpool can get on, and I go back to my point that I made about Andy Robertson. Listen, if you know, you are going to go for these competitions with everything that you've got, then Salah's key. And I do think that after the disappointing first half of the season, I just get the feeling that he'll come back. Again, it sounds a simple thing to say, but refresh from that break, and he'll come back and he'll lead that charge. I'm certain he'll lead that charge. We will see, I think, the Salah that we are accustomed to seeing in the second half of the season, and then you'll start breaking down low blocks.
I mean, obviously he was involved in AFCON with Egypt. They got to the semi-finals, ended up playing in the third place playoff, but he would have been keeping an eye on what's going on at Liverpool, and he'll have seen the results, and he'll have gone. I mean, it's not passed unnoticed that between him not starting and starting that game against Marseille, Liverpool were unbeaten in all of them. And do you reckon it may have just been a little bit, you know, in the back of his mind going, oh, do they actually still need me? Or as you say, is it kind of made him look and go, right, I can add a bit more to this. I know what I can do. Yeah,
I think the latter. It depends on how much we think Salah has taken notice. So do we think Salah has just looked at the results and thought, oh, hang on a minute, maybe I'm not as important to Liverpool as I think I am? Or has he looked at the results and then read your match reports and thought, actually,
he's definitely read the ratings. Yeah,
does he follow you on social media? And actually, he's actually, according to Doyle, they were absolutely terrible. And here we go again. They're drawn at home to Burnley. And then he might think, well, I think, listen, I think in general, he'll have watched the games. He'll know what's been said about the games. He'll know the way that Liverpool have played. And, we all know how these things can, the results can paint a slightly false impression. We all know the frustration that's been going around, the 4 draws on the spin. So I just think in all it will give him a lift. I think there'll be a balance, a combination of them both will be good. A combination of him thinking, well, actually, you know what? Life at Liverpool would go on and might go on quite successfully when I've gone or if I'm not there. But added to that, he'll still be thinking, you know what? I'm still the box. I'm still the game changer there. I'm still, we haven't seen, despite the good results. Listen, you look around now and you think, okay, game changing wise, then yeah, you think, Szoboszlai sort of has these moments of ingenuity with that free kick, for example. Obviously, Ekitike is shown he's a raw, exciting talent, and players playing okay, functioning okay, but it's been very functional, hasn't it? Functioned well, hence the 13 games unbeaten. But Salah, I think, is still looking at it, and I'm still looking at it and think, well, actually, he's still the mercurial talent. He's still the game changer. He's still the moment of magic that breaks down that low block. He didn't do in the first half of the season. Listen, there's no guarantee he's going to do in the second half of the season, but I just think he's too good not to. He looks fit. He looks well. He looks enthusiastic. And I just think now, get the transfer window closed and then just say, okay, probably, I would think we would all maybe think that he'll go in the summer, but there's still an awful lot to play for in the second half of the season, and he's got to be key to it. And again, from afar, Slot seems incredibly relaxed about their relationship now. The suggestions at the time, quite rightly, where it may be irreparable. It doesn't seem that way to me.
Just before we go any further, just a quick word from our sponsors, NordVPN. To get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to http://nordvpn.com/bloodred. Our link will also give you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The list is in the podcast episode description box below. Now, Andy, you mentioned Joe Gomez, his performance against Marseille, and obviously coming in slightly tricky situation. Obviously, Ibrahima Konate was not involved following, it turns out, the death of his father. But for Gomez, he was kind of like rolling back the years a little bit, wasn't he, playing at centre-back? It's the first time he's been there for a while, certainly alongside Virgil van Dijk.
He's a centre-back, Ian. I don't, I feel really strong. I like him a lot. I think he has been, it's certainly not over by any means. I think his England progress, I think, was halted unfairly. I'll leave it at that on that one. But I do think that, he has suffered almost for so many years. I say suffered. He has by being, people saying, well, actually, maybe you're not strong enough or sort of physical enough or to be an out-and-out centre-half, but then he goes to a full-back and then he's not, I don't know, maybe not good enough from a defensive point of view, because clearly all full-backs now have to be like, wingers. And he just suffered, literally caught between two stools. And I just think from way back, I would have just said to Joe Gomez, listen, whether or not he's encouraged that idea, I don't know. But I would have just said to him, listen, you're a centre-half. And play centre-half. That is what you are. Listen, I actually think, I don't know. Sometimes I think that his career in terms of, had another club come in and said, listen, you're going to be our centre-half, I think that might have done him good. I think he's a smashing player. I really do. He's a smashing player, smashing lad, and I would just like to see him being given run as centre-half. Obviously, the issue there, the problem is that he's not going to get past, as it stands, Konate and Van Dijk. So what does he do? Well, he keeps banging on the door there, and again, it's a long season, even though, Liverpool's going to be not far off a 60-game season. So he's got a chance. But yeah, sometimes you can be the victim of being, pretty good in 2 positions, but not absolutely outstanding in one. And that seems to be the perception of Joe Gomez.
The one thing about Gomez, and I think it was evidence against Marseille, is he's actually on the ball. He's a very good footballer, isn't he? I'd say of all Konaté's qualities, that's probably one of his lesser ones, but you could see the difference. And I think it was the third goal. He played the ball forward, snapped it in, and Szoboszlai flicks it on. Then Liverpool are away. He just brings that to the team, doesn't he?
He's a good footballer. He's been a good footballer from a very, very young age. Through all the development sides internationally, he's been a very, very, very good footballer. And good footballing centre halves are invaluable, and have been invaluable. And Liverpool have had some very, very good footballing centre halves, obviously. So yes, I just don't know. It is just one of those where you think, does he? Even if Konaté or Van Dijk were not available, then he comes in. But yes, they were obviously in for Gay. Will they be in for new centre half? We're talking about Vanderven. Yes, there hasn't been a manager, as far as I can see, either internationally or obviously at a club level, who's really, really trusted him to say, right, you're going to be a centre half. And it's like with centre halves, you need to be playing there regularly, and you need to form a partnership, not just with your fellow centre half, but with the whole defensive unit. And he just hasn't had a chance to do that. But listen, judging by, the other night, he will still have a big part to play, hopefully, in the rest of the season.
Just looking ahead then to the weekend, Liverpool are at Bournemouth, and I just checked that. I couldn't believe Bournemouth have only won one of the last 14 games. They've just kind of not. I know they've obviously had Semenyo's gone, but they have just collectively. Yeah,
but they've won one of the last. Is it 14? I think one of the last 14 total. One of the last 13 in the Premier. Anyway, one of the last however many. And of course, that game was against Dr. Tottenham.
Yes,
I mean, So if you had to say to someone which was the one, name me the team you've beaten once in these times, then it would be Spurs. Andy Robertson or no Andy Robertson's. Yeah, it is, and I've seen them a couple of times in that spell. Listen, I saw them in the, I don't know that was in that spell. I think it must have been 4-4 at Old Trafford.
Yeah,
and they were fantastic to watch. Absolutely fantastic to watch. Again, they keep, producing players to come and fill in. I saw the game the other night. Was it the Brighton game? And I thought they were a really, really handful going forward, but they do look vulnerable. And there's only so it just stands to reason, doesn't it, to say that you can only go around selling. Essentially, they sold pretty much their entire defence last summer, and then they sell their best player by some distance in the January transfer window. So you can only imagine as well that it must get a little bit wearing for the manager. The manager must think, listen, I know why we do it, because we're essentially a small club. And, you can't turn down these profits. But you must think, well, here we go again. But having said that, every time I see them, I can't fail to be impressed by the way they move the ball around. There's still a very, very, very hard-working team. I can definitely vouch for that the times I've seen them. But they are vulnerable. They are really vulnerable. And after that result in midweek, I really would expect Liverpool to go there and win.
I mean, one thing I noticed from watching Bournemouth, I went there last season when Liverpool played there, and what the press box is like, it's quite close to the pitch, is how physical they are. They do not mind getting stuck in. They don't mind going in for the challenge, and they're probably, along with Liverpool, one of the more intense teams in the league.
Mega intense. They really are. I saw them beat Manchester City there, and you're right. It's great. It's a great little ground, isn't it? I mean, it's brilliant. Park outside, go in, and you're literally on the pitch virtually, aren't you? It's absolutely fantastic. I don't know how they survive, in terms of with that. I mean, we saw those figures, didn't we? Just going off on a tangent a minute. We saw those figures for their Deloitte Money League, and obviously, which Liverpool, obviously, it's one league they're winning, isn't it? Well, from an English point of view. So they and you look at those figures and you get match day revenue of, I don't know. I mean, I think United's match day revenue was one of the highest. It's somewhere in 170 million pounds. I mean, how can Bournemouth, survive? Clearly, well, we know they survived. They sell Anton Semenyo for 60 million pounds and Dean Hussein for 50 million pounds, and that's how they survive. But it's brilliant to go there, and it's one of the, again, I'm not one of these people who say, the Premier League's unique, it's this, that. But it is one of the great sort of different test the Premier League throws up. You go to Bournemouth, the fans are on top of you. There is sort of, I wouldn't say Bournemouth fans. It's hardly intimidating in Bournemouth, is it really? I'm absolutely with you on that. They are very, very physical. And I don't know the stats. I'm sure they're out there somewhere. But they are a very, very hard-working, physical team. But having said that, I think that's something that Liverpool can match. I don't think it's something that, for example, when I saw, was it last year or the year before, when I saw City get beat there, that they managed to match. But I think Liverpool can.
You just touched on the Money League there. I mean, does that kind of underline, because looking at some of the figures, Liverpool made an awful lot of money off broadcast, and that's because they were back in the Champions League. And that does underline that if you even just have the one season out of the Champions League, which Liverpool had, it was only a couple of years ago when they were in the Europa League, Jurgen Klopp's last season, that it has a massive impact on the club, doesn't it?
It's unbelievable. I was, I looked at it, and as I say, I'm not a huge sort of fan of these Money League tables. You don't have a open top bus parade because you're top of the Deloitte's Money League table. It's not something to get the bunting out for. However, it is absolutely remarkable. United. So obviously there's the top 8 teams, and in Europe, and obviously I think top 4 were non-English teams. Liverpool was the top 3 non-English teams. Liverpool, anyway, the top English team. Followed by Manchester City, followed by Arsenal, followed by Manchester United in terms of total revenue. Manchester United's commercial revenue in terms of, merchandise and sponsorship, way up there, the highest of the, actually just behind City's in terms of the English teams. But what put them down 4th ranking English teams was that discrepancy in broadcast revenue. I couldn't believe it was that much, because United were in the Europa League that season, got to the final of the Europa League that season. Don't forget getting beaten by Spurs, and yet their broadcast revenue was £100 million less. £100 million less. I'm sure it was that sort of figure, if not in that ballpark. And that's astonishing. And don't forget, that's now going to happen again, because they haven't been in the Champions League this season. They haven't even been in the Europa League this season. And they reckon it'll even be more of a discrepancy. The broadcast is astonishing. And on top of that, I think City's figures may have been enhanced by Club World Cup participation. So you can't underestimate, as much as some people might like to, the value of the effect it has on not being in the Champions League. It seems to get more and more and more, because that Champions League broadcast money, which was signed essentially, and which is why we have this new expanded format, the 8-game qualifying phase, is because to get more broadcast revenue. Yeah, the big clubs can't do without it. I mean, they really can't. It's why United have got absolutely must get in there. So Liverpool, of course, then must get in there. So of all those things I mentioned earlier on about going to actually win the Champions League, obviously that would get you back in. That's probably obviously the safer route. The more realistic route is to finish top 4, top 5, as it will probably be when the coefficient's confirmed, and the top 5 English teams will get in. So Liverpool that has to be priority. Is you have to, as much as it, in an old school way, the idea of 4th place or 5th place being some sort of prize is a bit of, it grates, doesn't it? Like, it just grates, when people say, well, I mean, I had, Emery talking today, about 5th or 4th being the target when you're 3rd, or actually when they would actually sort of join 2nd in terms of points wise. And I'm like, well, I mean, it's just the sign of the times that, but when you look at those figures, you can understand why. And Liverpool should get 4th or 5th. I mean, they have to win games like they've got tomorrow. But, this is a season, and it's a strange one, really, when for all, for that implosion of that run of games that they lost, and for the run of games that they've drawn, they are still in, what you would call pole position, because that's because the standard below the top, well, probably the top 2, top 3, maybe even the top 1, is fairly mundane. I was looking through, Ian, the other day. I mean, when you find things on like you find a website that's quite easy to get around and tells you things that I mean, I don't want to sound old here, but like in the old days,
I was going to say if you're venturing towards that,
I'm going dangerously close towards when you go through the record book. So out of interest, I just thought to myself, you know what? I just thought Liverpool fourth on 36 points, yeah,
I think so. Yeah.
36 points after 22 games, and I just thought to myself, I thought, you know what? I thought that's got to be fairly low for this stage of the season for a team to be forward. And then I found this, as I say, in the old days, I could never have checked that. I mean, without getting the paper for every year, I could never have checked that. But then you find these websites, and I can tell exactly the league tables after 22 games for every single Premier League season. Yeah. And as it happens, that is the lowest that a team has ever had in terms of points at this stage of the season to be fourth in the league, which shows you how accessible it is, which shows you actually, you know what, the competition, it's big in terms of numbers, but not in terms of quality. There was no way in none of the previous, how many are we, 34 Premier League seasons, has 36 points been enough to be fourth after 22 games. So if any team puts together a succession of winning results, then they're gonna secure Champions League football, sooner rather than later. And I think that's what Liverpool fans would expect, and I would expect them to go and do that now.
Well, normally at this point, I'd ask our guest to pick the Liverpool team for the game, but I'll spare you that, and I'll just say thanks.
I think Robertson's got to play.
Tell you what, it'd be interesting if he did. But thanks for coming on. And for everybody else, we'll see you after the Bournemouth game at the start of next week. Cheerio.
This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo, giving you the inside track on all the big talking points from Anfield.